June 13th, 1901. In the magnificent Redpath Mansion on Sherbrooke Street in Montreal, gunshots ring out from one of the bedrooms. Peter Redpath rushes upstairs and breaks into his mother's bedroom to find his mother, 56-year-old Ada Mills Redpath, and his brother, 24-year-old Jocelyn Clifford Redpath, lying in a pool of blood a few feet apart. Both Ada and Clifford have sustained gunshot wounds to the head, and a revolver is found lying between them. No police are called to investigate the scene where two members of one of the wealthiest families in Canada have seemingly been shot. Instead, doctors are quickly summoned to the scene, briefly examining it. With Ada dying in the bedroom, Clifford is rushed to the Royal Victoria Hospital, but he dies shortly after arriving too. Within 48 hours, both victims are buried. At least this is the story that was reported at the time, and as no police investigation was ever carried out, and no official reports were ever made about the incident, they are the only source of information about what may have unfolded that night. Initially, it was believed that Clifford had been killed while trying to prevent his ailing and depressed mother from taking her own life. But witness statements became increasingly contradictory and confusing, making it impossible to determine the truth of what really happened that evening in the bedroom of the Grand Redpath Mansion. Peter reported hearing 2 shots in his first account, but later changed it to 3. He claimed there was a single revolver at the scene lying between his mother and brother, but one of the attending doctors later mentioned there being 2 revolvers in the room, perhaps hinting at the presence of another unknown entity. The family physician claimed Clifford had suffered from an epileptic fit during the incident, yet there is not a single mention of Clifford suffering from epilepsy, as the doctor claims he did, in the family's extensive diaries. The same doctor also seemingly lied about examining the bodies that night, as he wasn't even in the city till the following day. Although often reported as a mercy killing due to Ada's severe rheumatism, Peter later claimed that Clifford was gay and may have killed his mother and himself in a failed coming-out attempt. Ada's will was also changed to pass all of her wealth and fortune onto her daughter Amy, a little while before the incident, whose whereabouts during the shootings remain unknown, and whose actions after the incident are, at the very least, confusing. And bizarrely, despite being ruled a murder-suicide, no suicides were recorded in Montreal that year, nor was there ever a record of Clifford being admitted into hospital. With the truth of what happened that evening being literally buried alongside Ada and Clifford a mere 2 days later, let's try and dissect the contradictory information that has been reported about this lesser-known murder mystery, and try and make some sense of it. At the dawn of the 20th century, a group of extremely wealthy families resided in an exclusive neighborhood on the slopes of Mount Royal, known as the Square Mile. This affluent enclave was composed of close-knit English-speaking families, headed by influential business owners and industrial leaders sometimes called the Merchant Princes by the local media. With prestigious schools, elegant gardens, and grand mansions, the neighborhood contrasted sharply with the more industrial and gritty parts of Montreal that surrounded it. Within this community, one of the wealthiest families were the Redpaths, known for their philanthropy and industrial ventures. The family's patriarch, John Redpath, immigrated to Canada in 1816 and worked on several significant projects throughout the 19th century, earning his family's wealth and reputation. He notably constructed Montreal's Notre Dame Basilica and built both the Lachine Canal in Montreal and the Rideau Canal in Ottawa. John Redpath eventually purchased 235 acres of land on Mount Royal, where he built a mansion for his family and subdivided the remaining property for sale. With the profits, he established the Canada Sugar Refining Company in 1854, now known as Redpath Sugar. Ada Redpath was the widow of John Redpath's son, John James Redpath, who had died about 25 years before the tragic events that unfolded in 1901. Born Ada Maria Mills in 1842, the family matriarch was the daughter of prominent merchant John Easton Mills, who became mayor of Montreal when she was just 4 years old. Not long after, her father fell ill while tending to typhus victims in Point St. Charles and passed away. At age 25, Ada married John James Redpath. Even though she was marrying into one of the wealthiest families in Canada, Ada had substantial money of her own. Although it was customary at the time for a woman's assets to be entirely controlled by her husband, Ada negotiated a marriage contract that allowed her to retain control over her own assets, as if she were single. This desire for financial independence would seemingly be extended to her daughter Amy, In her final will, Ada had ensured that Amy would have control over her inheritance in a similar setup to the one Ada had negotiated for herself. The only daughter the couple had, Amy had 4 younger siblings: Peter Whiteford, John Reginald, Harold, and Jocelyn Clifford. The Redpath children grew up in a grand 4-story mansion at 1065 Sherbrooke Street, adorned with classic stone columns and meticulously landscaped vines, trees, and grounds. In June 1884, after 17 years of marriage, John James Redpath passed away and was interred in the family plot, with his cause of death officially attributed to paralysis. And by 1901, with the 5 children grown and pursuing their own paths, only Amy and the youngest Redpath, Clifford, were still living in the mansion with Ada. Though there were also 3 staff members employed at the house due to Ada's deteriorating health. Ada's health had notably declined over the years, with reports indicating that she suffered from insomnia, depression, and partial paralysis on one side of her body, and she frequently found herself bedridden for extended periods. Much of what we know about Ada's health comes from her daughter, Amy, who wrote about doctor visits in her extensive diaries. It was also around this time, according to Amy's diaries, that Ada created a new will, in which Amy would be the recipient of the majority of Ada's assets upon her death. According to the diary entries, Amy had been forced to take over many of the household responsibilities from her mother, such as shopping, scheduling appointments, and organizing repairs. Amy even took the time to transcribe Clifford's law lectures to assist him with his studies, as during this period Clifford had switched from studying art to studying law, and was apprenticing at a respected law firm. When not studying, Clifford would help care for his mother alongside his sister, and by 1898 she had become entirely reliant on the 2 of them. Around this period, Ada would occasionally stay in an exclusive sanatorium in the Adirondacks to treat her melancholia, though she normally returned home soon after checking in. During one of these visits, she wrote a letter to Clifford stating, "Oh, how I miss you. I have become so reliant on you that I feel lost without you. Nothing seems worthwhile in your absence." By June of 1901, Clifford had graduated with a distinction and had paid the fee for the bar exam with the intention of becoming a partner at the firm he had been apprenticing at. Simultaneously, Peter, who had been in Colorado for treatment for his own health issues, had just returned to Montreal. On June 13, 1901, despite her health issues, Ada had planned a summer dinner party, and preparations were underway in the Redpath Mansion at 1065 Sherbrooke Street for the evening's guests to arrive. But nobody could have predicted the horrific events that were about to unfold within the walls of the Grand Mansion. Clifford spent the morning in downtown Montreal, meeting his brother Harold at around 2 p.m., who would later describe him as in good spirits, though somewhat unwell. Many of the papers at the time speculated that Clifford had been getting increasingly depressed throughout the day, though it's unclear where exactly this idea came from. Upon returning home, Clifford spoke briefly with his brother Peter before going straight up to see his mother and check if she was feeling well enough to attend the dinner party that evening. But at approximately 6 p.m., only moments later, gunshots were heard in the Redpath Mansion. Peter rushed up to his mother's bedroom alongside one of their maids and broke down the door to discover Ada and Clifford in a pool of blood on the floor, both suffering from gunshot wounds. Ada had been shot in the back of the head and the right shoulder, while Clifford had sustained a gunshot wound to his forehead, just above the left eye. Dr. Thomas Roddick, the Redpath family physician, was away at the time, so instead Drs. Campbell, Mathewson, and Mackenzie were called to the scene. Reports around what happened next are contradictory, so it is unclear if Ada was dead when she was discovered, or if she died shortly after the doctors arrived. Regardless, Ada died at the scene, and Clifford, suffering from severe injuries, was transported by ambulance to the Royal Victoria Hospital. As you can imagine, the planned dinner party was abruptly cancelled, and the arriving guests were all turned away by the household staff. Clifford was attended by Dr. Bell at the hospital, but despite the medical team's best efforts, he never regained consciousness and died shortly before midnight. Curiously, no official hospital records of Clifford's admission have ever been found. Police were not contacted by the Redpath family or anyone else, and only learned about the shootings later that evening by accident. At the time, the Anglican Church prohibited full Christian funerals for anyone who had died by suicide. But despite this, both Ada and Clifford received high Anglican funerals and private services at St. John the Evangelist Church, and less than 48 hours after their deaths, they were buried in the family plot. Because of the Redpath family's prominence and the nature of the crime, the incident drew significant national attention. The next day's newspapers suggested that Clifford had been mentally unstable due to the stress of his approaching bar exam, which led him to shoot his mother. In general, the lack of witnesses or any clear motive led the press to speculate about what happened, and to what degree the events were accidental or deliberate. Dr. Roddick, the family physician for the last 20 years, expressed doubt that Clifford would ever have harmed his mother in a rational state of mind. He highlighted that Clifford had been suffering from insomnia and epilepsy, which could have triggered a seizure. The rest of the Redpath family, including all of Clifford's siblings, refrained from making public comments about what had happened. An official inquest was conducted on June 14th at the Redpath Mansion, in which Peter provided the following testimony to the 13-member jury. "I saw my brother arrive home around 6 o'clock. He appeared ill and fatigued. He went up to our mother's room. A few seconds later, I heard a gunshot followed by 2 more. I rushed upstairs, broke down the door, and found my mother on the floor. My brother was lying a few feet away, also on the floor, with a revolver near his hand." Peter also stated that Clifford seemed ill and was tired that evening and had been nervous for some time. The only other witness to the events, the Redpath's maid Mary Rose Shallow, also provided an account, stating, "I heard the shots and went upstairs immediately after Mr. Peter Redpath. I saw the 2 bodies on the floor, separated by a few feet." Peter reported, as mentioned a moment ago, that a single revolver was discovered, and Rose also highlighted she had no knowledge there was a gun in the house prior to the incident. Yet Charles James Fleet, a lawyer related to the Redpaths and living nearby, testified at the inquest, stating, "Dr. Campbell handed me both revolvers, which I secured. One revolver had 2 chambers empty, and the other, one. The types and placement of the gunshot wounds was also contradicted multiple times, with Peter altering the amount of shots he heard from 2 to 3 at the inquest. With the placement of the wounds in doubt and multiple revolvers seemingly used in the incident, the murder-suicide explanation feels sketchy at best." The doctors who had been summoned to the scene provided their own testimonies to the jury. Dr. Campbell claimed he saw foam around Clifford's mouth, which could indicate he had suffered from a seizure, an idea Dr. Patton backed up by claiming Clifford showed signs of what he called cerebral congestion, and likely had had an epileptic seizure. The family physician, Dr. Roddick, testified that he was called to confirm the deaths at the mansion, and also stated he believed Clifford had suffered a seizure and was not responsible for his actions. According to him, Clifford had a long history of epileptic fits. However, despite his statement, Dr. Roddick was later discovered to have been in Toronto, only having returned the morning of the inquest, making his claim impossible to have been true. And despite there being no official records, it seems likely Clifford was taken to hospital and treated by Dr. Bell until he passed away, not Dr. Roddick at the mansion, which raises an immediate and intriguing question: why was he lying? The coroner ultimately concluded that Ada had died from gunshot wounds inflicted by her son, and that Clifford had suffered a gunshot wound inflicted by himself. While there were suggestions that Clifford may have been drinking prior to the shooting, or may have suffered an epileptic fit, the ultimate ruling from the jury was that Clifford, in a state of temporary insanity, had shot his mother twice before taking his own life. Curiously, despite the conclusions of the official inquest, city records from Montreal show that there were no reported suicides in June 1901. The family's silence and the apparent sanitization of all official documents related to the case have, as you can imagine, led some to speculate whether there was a cover-up at play. Given murder-suicide would have been among the most damaging narratives for the esteemed family to publicly present. If this story was part of a cover-up, as it appears it might have been, what exactly was being hidden? Rumors and alternate theories spread like wildfire in the national newspapers. Some articles claimed that Ada had mentioned wanting to die prior to the incident, leading them to speculate that she may have been attempting to take her own life when Clifford intervened, leading to a struggle in which she was shot, and upon seeing what had happened, caused Clifford to take his own life. The mental states of Clifford and Ada on the night of the tragedy remain contentious. Clifford had recently paid the fee for his upcoming bar exam, which seems inconsistent with a theory of profound unhappiness or depression leading to suicide. Additionally, the planned dinner party that evening contradicts the notion that Ada might have been contemplating suicide. Amy, who managed the household, would have been responsible for the party preparations, yet her involvement in the events of that night is not documented. Despite the confusion over how many guns there were, if Clifford had intended to kill his mother or had attempted to save her, all of the presented theories made one solid assumption: that Ada and Clifford were alone in the bedroom during the incident. But what if that wasn't the case? Perhaps most interestingly of all, Amy's whereabouts during the shooting have never been clarified or explained. Given Amy, the eldest child and only daughter, was set to inherit control of the mansion and the entire family fortune after Ada's death, due to her recently changed will. From an outside perspective, she appears to be the only one with a motive for wanting Ada dead. After inheriting everything, Amy quickly managed to suppress any discussion of the tragedy, and within a short period, there was little public mention of Ada, Clifford, or their deaths. Another version of the story suggests that a quarrel took place before the shooting, with Peter later claiming that Clifford was gay and had likely gone to his mother to disclose this to her, which may have led to the argument. But a year after the events, Peter died from tuberculosis, making it impossible to explore this angle any further and leaving only one single known witness alive: the family maid, Rose. Amy had kept detailed diaries throughout her entire life, as already discussed. Yet she never once mentioned Clifford's supposed epileptic fits the family physician claimed he suffered frequently from, and she never once addressed or mentioned the events of that fateful night in her diaries. 2 months after the deaths of her mother and brother, however, Amy wrote a letter to her sister-in-law, Alice, in which she described sorting and destroying old letters, making it the only time she ever mentioned the tragedy in writing. Dr. Roddick, the family physician that it appears lied about Clifford having epilepsy and about his presence examining the bodies, intriguingly married Amy 5 years after the tragedy. Despite her detailed diaries, Amy made little mention of her romantic life until her sudden marriage to Dr. Roddick, who was 22 years older than her, and there is perhaps a reason for that. Many modern researchers have speculated that Amy may have had romantic feelings for her maid, Rose, who continued to work for her at the Redpath Mansion for the rest of her life. Having never married, Rose accompanied Amy on trips to Europe, Africa, and the United States, and was sat in the front row at her wedding. Amy also employed Rose's sister Margaret as a housekeeper. Having had no children with Dr. Roddick, Amy dedicated herself to writing poetry and plays, with theater historian Kim Bird describing her as the first identifiably lesbian playwright in Canada. When Dr. Roddick passed away in 1923, Amy created a new will for herself, which included a yearly allowance for both Rose and Margaret. It also set out that Rose would inherit Amy's clothing, alongside her $1,200 income. However, Rose ultimately died before Amy, passing away in 1943. Interestingly, shortly after her death, a poem honoring her appeared in the Montreal Gazette, signed only with the initials DS. Titled The Quest, the poem read, "If in our idle quest we find the empty nest, we know the bird has flown. But in what sunny clime it sings its song sublime, to us is still unknown. So in our homes bereft, we miss the one that's gone. And though the heart is cleft, we know they have but flown to sing in lovelier worlds, where sorrow is unknown." After being buried at Notre-Dame-des-Neiges Cemetery, Rose's remains were exhumed a year later and buried in the Redpath plot, inscribed with the phrase, "Beloved companion of Lady Roddick." Amy herself lived in the family mansion until she passed away in 1954 at age 86. Having outlived all of her siblings and with no children or heirs to inherit the estate, the Redpath Mansion was demolished. Despite 120 years having passed, the mystery of what happened that night in the Redpath Mansion remains unsolved, with contradictory information, missing documents, and clear lies clouding the truth. While it is to be expected that an elite, wealthy family might cover up something unpleasant that they don't want the world to know about, it doesn't feel like that's exactly what happened here. If anything, it seems like the family peddled a muddled narrative that was extremely unpleasant to cover something else up. Who actually shot who? And what were their motives? Why are there so many conflicting accounts? Why was the investigation that was conducted so brief? Why were the police never notified? Why is there speculation about whether Clifford went to the hospital? Most intriguingly, why is the incident classified as a suicide when no suicides were reported in Montreal in June 1901? It seems unlikely that the exact circumstances of the events at 1065 Sherbrooke Street will ever be fully known. Whether the incident was a murder-suicide, a double homicide, or a tragic accident, the specifics remain elusive. Could it have been a cover-up for a brutal crime? Or does it reflect the societal pressures and stigma of the upper class at that time, possibly linked to a mental breakdown by either mother or son, with Amy appearing to be the only one with something to gain out of her mother's death? Why is Amy's whereabouts during the shooting not documented? Why did she go on to marry the same family physician who appears to have lied multiple times about what happened? Based on the existing information, it appears Amy may have been a lesbian and romantically involved with one of the only witnesses, Rose. Yet according to Peter, it was Clifford who was gay, and this may have motivated his actions that night. This case is a really muddled and confusing one, and sadly, being nearly 120 years old, with most official documents missing or deliberately removed, we may never find the truth behind what actually happened. And with that, our exploration of this mysterious case comes to a close. Let me know your thoughts about it down in the comments section below, and if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and check out some of my other true crime videos up on the channel. You have been watching The Mystery Abyss. January 23, 1897. Erasmus Stribling Shue, known as Trout, went to visit a neighbor in Lewisburg, West Virginia, requesting her son Anderson Jones help out with some household chores at his home, as his wife Zona had been feeling unwell. But when Anderson entered the Shue household, he was shocked to find Zona lying motionless at the foot of the staircase. He stood for a moment looking at the woman, not knowing what to make of the scene. Her body was stretched out straight with her legs together. One arm was at her side, and the other rested across her chest. Her head was tilted to one side, and she was clearly dead. When family of Zona arrived to prepare her for her burial, they discovered that Trout had already taken it upon himself to move his wife's body to the bedroom and dress her in a long gown with a high collar and a scarf around her neck. Despite not matching her outfit, Trout insisted it was her favorite scarf, and so he wanted her to wear it. Dr. Knapp, the local physician, conducted a post-mortem on her in the presence of Trout, initially attributing her death to an everlasting faint, which modern interpretation equates to a heart attack, and later revising it to complications with pregnancy. At the wake, mourners gathered to pay their respects to Zona, yet Trout exhibited strange behavior, refusing to allow anyone near her head, which he was constantly fussing over, adding a veil, propping it up with pillows and so on, to supposedly ensure her comfort. Zona was laid to rest in the local Methodist cemetery, and to most of her friends and relatives, Trout's dramatic mourning behavior was merely seen as peculiar, not necessarily suspicious. Well, except for one, Mary Jane Heister, Zona's mother. Mary Jane had always had an odd feeling about her son-in-law, and couldn't shake the sense that he had had something to do with her daughter's untimely demise. A devout woman, Mary Jane turned to the Bible for guidance, praying endlessly every night for her daughter to return and provide her with clarity about her death. After several nights of fervent prayer, an otherworldly light pierced Mary Jane's bedroom, gradually taking on a human form. In awe, she watched as the ghost of her daughter materialized right before her. But this was not a fleeting glance at Zona's ghost. This spirit spoke to her, telling Mary Jane about the events that transpired on her final night. According to the ghost, Zona was preparing a meal for her husband when, enraged by the lack of meat in her recipe, he launched into a violent outburst, placing his hands on either side of her head. His grip was so tight that he crushed her windpipe and ultimately snapped her neck between the first and second vertebrae. Zona's ghost told her mother that this was not an isolated incident, and she had suffered constant abuse at the hands of her husband. The ghostly presence then vanished, but she returned for the next 4 nights, each time reiterating the details of her murder at the hands of Trout. On the final night of the ghost's haunting, Zona's ghost turned her head completely around on her body, revealing the extent of her injuries to her mother before vanishing forever. With this information, Mary Jane contacted the authorities who, despite skepticism, agreed to exhume Zona's body. Shockingly, they discovered signs of strangulation, and a broken neck snapped between the first and second vertebrae, just as the ghost had described. This revelation would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge conventional beliefs and legal proceedings in Greenbrier County, and ensure the death of Zona was etched into the history of American folklore forever, as it became the only documented instance where the testimony of a ghost was not only used in court, but played a pivotal role in the conviction of a murderer. This is the story of the Greenbrier Ghost. Elva Zona Heister was born near the base of Little Sewell Mountain, just north of Meadow Bluff, and spent her entire life within Greenbrier County, surrounded by mountainous terrain, steep valleys, dense forests, and winding streams. The middle child among 4 brothers, she was raised in a devout household. But other than that, little is known about her brief life, as she is primarily remembered for the events that transpired after it was over. Life in Greenbrier County was a difficult one. With the rocky, steep terrain, families could only make a meager living from farming, And while the weather in spring and autumn was beautiful, summers were oppressively humid, and the snowy, cold winters were lethal. Disease also posed a major threat to inhabitants, and it was not uncommon for someone to wake up healthy in the morning and be dead by nightfall. Family reputations meant everything in the small towns of Greenbrier County, with your family name influencing every aspect of your life, from your ability to secure loans to the types of marriage proposals you could hope to receive. By 1985, Zona had recently turned 20 and had given birth to a child out of wedlock with a man called George Woldridge after a drunken encounter. As George lacked financial stability or steady employment, he was unable to support a wife or child and chose not to marry Zona or play any role in her and her child's life. What happened to this child is unknown, as there are no records of it after its birth. To try and save her from being ostracized from the judgmental community, Zona's God-fearing mother tried to preserve her reputation until she could be married off. Given the family were already struggling to make ends meet and likely feared an illegitimate child would tarnish their reputation, it's possible they forced Zona to give the child up, resulting in our lack of records for what happened to it. Feeling trapped and isolated at the base of Little Sewell Mountain, far from the nearest town, Zona frequently visited her cousins in Falling Spring, and it was there that the following year she met a blacksmith known as Trout. Erasmus Stribling Shue, known as Trout, was born in Mossy Creek in Fayette County to Jacob Shue, a respected blacksmith whose trade he followed in. The family later moved to Droop Mountain near the border of Greenbrier County, an area that was infamous for a pivotal Civil War battle that many of the locals at the time believed was haunted, claiming to see spectral beings and hear eerie sounds in the night. Working in the shop of James Cruikshank, Trout crossed paths with Zona in 1986, who fell quickly for the older man. Trout Shue was described as a large, powerful man with charisma, black hair, blue eyes, and strikingly handsome. However, Trout carried his own dark history. You see, Trout had recently been married to 16-year-old Lucy Ann Tritt until her untimely death on February 11, 1895. Shortly after marrying her and settling on Droop Mountain, Lucy died when she was fatally struck by a falling brick while Trout was allegedly working on their chimney. However, given the winter had been extremely harsh, many deemed it highly unlikely Trout would have been working on the chimney, shedding doubt on his explanation for Lucy's mysterious death. There also exists rumors that Lucy had been pregnant prior to their marriage, and that her death had been the result of childbirth. So it's a little unclear what actually happened to her. Trout has often been portrayed as a stranger escaping his past when he met Zona, but in reality, Lucy's family home was only 7 miles away from Zona's family home, making it highly unlikely he wasn't already known to them, or that they weren't already aware of each other's scandals. Prior to marrying Lucy, Trout had also been married to Allie Esteline Cutlip, who he had a daughter named Girta Lucretia Shue with. The pair lived in Falling Spring, the same small town where Zona would frequently visit her cousins. Legend has claimed that Trout was so abusive towards Allie that at one point local men had to intervene, dragging him from his bed and throwing him into the Greenbrier River as a warning. Versions of this story decades later have even claimed that Trout had killed both of his first wives, Lucy and Allie. But this is not true, as Allie was alive in 1897 when she was recorded obtaining a marriage license in Lewisburg. It's also highly unlikely, had any of these legends of murder and abuse been true, that Trout would have returned to a town where he was seemingly so hated and had such a poor reputation. In fact, given he worked for James Cruikshanks, it feels much more likely these sorts of details were added after the dramatic story of what happened to Zona. Cruikshanks wielded considerable influence and was known for owning several forges, including a larger establishment in Lewisburg. To manage these various operations, he required trustworthy workers and would not have risked his reputation hiring someone like Trout if these stories were prevalent at the time. It seems likely that many of the stories about Trout being an abusive monster who murdered all of his previous wives have been exaggerated over time as the story of the Greenbrier Ghost has been retold and embellished. From the very start, Zona's mother Mary Jane took a disliking to Trout, and she vehemently opposed them getting married. Supporting her argument, Mary Jane flagged the fact that Trout had been married twice before, had abandoned his child, and had served time in prison for stealing horses. Ignoring her mother's objections, Zona chose to marry him anyway. And in November 1896, just 3 weeks after they had met, the pair were wed in a Methodist church at Livesey's Mill. They soon moved into a 2-story frame house near Trout's blacksmith shop, and were described by their neighbors as a dedicated husband and a devoted wife. But in early 1897, Zona fell ill. Though the exact nature of her illness remains unknown, rumors circulated that she may have been pregnant again, potentially prompting their hasty marriage. Attended by Dr. George Knapp, Trout remained by her side, and witnesses would later testify that he showed genuine concern and care for her well-being. But then, on January 22nd, Trout stopped by the Anderson household on his way to the forge, asking a neighbor affectionately called Aunt Martha if her 11-year-old son, Anderson, could check on his wife as she needed help pickling eggs and he did not want her to be out in the cold. After finishing his various jobs at home, Anderson headed over to the Shue house around lunchtime. Trout had returned 4 times to Aunt Martha's that morning to inquire if Anderson had visited yet, growing increasingly agitated with each visit. Upon reaching the front porch, Anderson knocked on the door but received no response, so he cautiously opened the door and called out for Mrs. Shue. Once again, he heard only silence. Stepping into the house, he quickly discovered Zona lying at the foot of the stairs. She was stretched out with her feet together, one hand resting on her abdomen and the other lying beside her. Her head was turned to one side, and her eyes were wide open. Terrified, the 11-year-old fled across the field, screaming until he reached his own home. Alongside his mother, they ran to inform Trout before fetching Dr. Knapp. Arriving at the house, Dr. Knapp found Trout in the bedroom, cradling his deceased wife's head, seemingly overcome with grief. Before his arrival, against all local traditions, Trout had already changed Zona's clothes, putting her in a dress with a tall, stiff collar and a veil over her face, with what he claimed to be her favorite scarf around her neck. Dr. Knapp checked Zona for any signs of life, but found none. He conducted a brief examination of her body to try and ascertain the cause of death. But the process seemed to disturb Trout further, making Dr. Knapp reluctant to upset him more. Trout remained by her head the entire time, refusing to allow the doctor near it. So, given her recent poor health, the doctor attributed her death to a never-ending faint, aka a heart attack, before later revising his diagnosis to childbirth complications, despite no one having ever been told she was pregnant. Before we move on to what happened next, I just want to pause for a moment to discuss this part of the story. Despite the previously told version being the basic facts of the Greenbrier Ghost legend, it might not be entirely accurate. Most of the reporting on the case only took place after the more dramatic revelations in the trial we will soon get to, so the earlier details are often sketchy at best. That said, in 1910, Anderson gave an interview which perhaps frames the events in a slightly different light. The following words are directly from Anderson himself. Going to the house, I felt that something was wrong. All of the doors were closed, and there was an air about the place I did not like. Reaching the steps, I saw a trail of blood. That scared me, but I went to the door and knocked. No one answered. I tried it, and finding the door unlocked, walked into the kitchen. The trail of blood continued across the floor to the dining room. This door, too, was closed. Once more I knocked, and getting no answer, walked in. I stumbled over Mrs. Shue's body. There she was, stretched out on the floor, looking right up at me through wide-open eyes. She seemed to be laughing. I was frightened, but still able to reach down and shake her. She was stiff and cold. Running from the house, I called across the field to Aunt Martha, "Miss Shue is dead!" As she ran to the house, I went down the road for Mr. Shue, finding him at the blacksmith shop with Charles Tapscott. When I told him what I had found, he let out a yell and with Mr. Tapscott started for the house. I continued on to get Dr. Knapp. There are some interesting things to note in his description of the events which, whether true or not, are one of the only first-hand accounts of what happened that day. For one, he claims Zona was not at the bottom of the stairs and was instead discovered in the dining room. He also mentions a trail of blood, which is a detail that has been removed from the folkloric version of this case. So what was the cause of this mysterious blood trail? Is it possible that Zona was actually pregnant, resulting in her swift marriage to Trout? And if so, could her unknown illness that was kept hushed from everybody be related to pregnancy? Going further with this train of thought, could the blood be the result of a miscarriage or other such pregnancy-based complication? This would go a long way to explain why Dr. Knapp ultimately ruled childbirth as her cause of death. Anderson also points out that he instantly told his mother, Aunt Martha, who rushed to the house while he himself went to inform Trout and then get the doctor. If this is accurate, then Aunt Martha would have been at the house before Trout returned, meaning there was no point between Trout getting home and Dr. Knapp arriving that he was completely alone with Zona's body to tamper with it unnoticed. Later records indicate that the body had already been moved upstairs and onto the bed when the doctor arrived, though Zona's clothes had not been changed as in the commonly told version of the story. Local women, perhaps even Aunt Martha, assisted in dressing Zona after the doctor examined her. And while the high-necked dress might have seemed like an odd choice, it was actually Zona's wedding dress, and likely the nicest outfit she owned. However, it is true that Trout held his wife's head in his hands throughout the examination and during the dressing process, which was explained as the actions of a grieving husband at the time. Anyway, I just wanted to interject with some details that perhaps undermine some of the claims of the folklore legend. Let's get back to our story. Zona's funeral took place the day after her death. Throughout the wake, Trout remained inconsolable and refused to leave his wife's side. He was seen cradling her head in his hands and placing pillows and sheets around it, supposedly to ensure her comfort. Zona was laid to rest on January 25th in the cemetery of a Methodist church atop Sewell Mountain. Her grave remained unmarked until 1979, nearly a century later, when the church congregation finally erected a marker for arguably its most famous occupant. As soon as she had heard the news, Mary Jane declared, "The devil has killed her," instantly believing Trout was responsible for her daughter's death. After the funeral, Mary Jane took the sheet that had been used to prop up Zona's head to return it to Trout. But when Trout refused to accept it, she decided to bring it home with her instead and began to hand wash it. To her horror, the water in the basin began to run blood red, emitting a foul stench of decay. As suddenly as the water had turned red, it cleared, but the sheet remained stained a haunting pink. Convinced this was a sign from a higher power, Mary Jane turned to prayer. Night after night, she begged for her daughter to return and reveal the truth behind her death. Shockingly, on a dark and moonless night, Mary Jane witnessed a radiant white light that slowly formed into the apparition of Zona herself. Unlike a mere spirit, Zona appeared corporeal and cold to the touch. The ghost of Zona visited her mother for 4 consecutive nights, each time recounting her with the harrowing details of her demise, and of how Trout had been cruel and abusive throughout their relationship. According to the ghost, that night Trout had returned home and became enraged when he realized Zona had not prepared him meat for his supper. In a fit of anger and blind fury, he overpowered her and strangled her to death. His grip was so tight that he crushed her windpipe and ultimately snapped her neck between the first and second vertebrae, ending a marriage filled with abuse. Finally, the ghost turned her head completely around on her body, revealing the extent of her injuries to her mother before vanishing forever. At least that's the story as Mary Jane told it. With her killer revealed from beyond the grave, Zona's mother embarked on a relentless mission to bring Trout to justice. As news of Zona's ghost spread through Falling Spring, local sentiment against Trout was galvanized, with rumors beginning to swirl about his involvement in Zona's death and his questionable background. In the mountains, belief in ghosts was commonplace at the time. Death was a frequent visitor, and the line between this world and the next often blurred in the misty landscape. The dead were known to cross over, a fact widely accepted by the mountain folk. This belief permeated folk songs, literature, and storytelling traditions. Alongside her mob of supporters, Mary Jane urged County Prosecutor John Alfred Preston to reopen the case based on her daughter's supernatural testimony. Preston spoke with Dr. Knapp, who confessed that his initial examination had been cursory due to Trout's behavior, and acknowledged noticing potential bruises on Zona's neck. Additionally, townspeople informed Preston about Trout's peculiar behavior during Zona's wake. He had prevented anyone from getting close to the coffin and had placed a pillow on one side of her head. With the widespread community's suspicions, alongside the genuine concerns of Dr. Knapp, Preston made the shocking decision to exhume Zona's body for re-examination. On March 9th, over a month after Zona's death, her remains were exhumed and examined. Zona Shue vigorously complained about the exhumation, but he was informed attendance at the inquest was compulsory. In response, he hauntingly muttered, "They will not be able to prove I did it." Dr. Knapp and a team of physicians performed the autopsy, with the cold weather having preserved the body remarkably well. They carefully checked her stomach for signs of poison and inspected her vital organs in her chest and abdomen. According to Anderson, who attended the autopsy alongside many others, including Mary Jane, suddenly the doctor turned to Mr. Preston. They whispered together for a few minutes. Then, Mr. Preston turned to Shue and said, "Well, Shue, we have found your wife's neck to be broken." Shue's head dropped. A change came over him that I can't explain, but it certainly proved his guilt to me. To everyone's astonishment, the autopsy revealed finger-shaped bruises around Zona's neck. More alarmingly, her windpipe was crushed and her neck had fractures at the first and second vertebrae, precisely as described by the spectral testimony. Trout was immediately arrested, imprisoned, and held without bail for the first-degree murder of his wife. In those times, as we've seen before, justice moved very, very slowly, so it wasn't until June that Judge McWhorter arrived in Lewisburg for the trial. Outside of the supernatural accusations against him, the evidence against Trout was largely circumstantial. However, his defense attorneys were facing an uphill battle, as Mary Ann's ghostly story and damning portrayal of Trout had completely taken over public discourse about the case. Making matters even more difficult for Trout's defense, His attorneys were William Rucker and James Gardner, the first African-American attorney to practice in a Greenbrier court. With prejudices against African Americans in positions of authority in the South at the time prevalent, it likely made their task even more difficult than it already was to win over a jury of locals. On June 30, 1897, the trial of Trout Shue for the murder of Zona Shue commenced. Prosecutor Preston presented as much tangible evidence against him as he could, citing testimonies from a number of witnesses about how Trout had refused to allow anyone near his wife's body at the wake and funeral. The witnesses also highlighted the peculiarities of her burial clothes, indicating that the high-neck collar and scarf were tied tightly around her neck to conceal something. They also noted how Trout's extreme grief seemed to vanish unusually quickly after the funeral, pointing out how strange his behavior was. But the most compelling evidence against Trout was, of course, the spectral testimony of Zona, something Preston couldn't technically introduce into the courtroom. Famously used in the Salem witch trials of 1692, testimony based on visions and spirits had resulted in the wrongful execution of at least 20 people before it was eventually deemed as inadmissible. Rucker and Gardner, defending Trout, tried to propose alternate theories as to how Zona could have broken her neck. They suggested it may have been caused after her death by the way her body was handled during the cold winter during dressing, placing it in the coffin, and transporting it 15 miles over frozen roads. They also tried to undermine the credibility of Mary Jane's story about being visited by Zona's ghost. While this might seem counterproductive, because the story was so widely told and believed, they had no choice but to address it if they hoped to win. So when Mary Jane was brought to the stand by the prosecution, they skirted around the ghostly visitation, focusing on the circumstantial evidence. But knowing they needed to challenge Mary Jane and her account, the defense had no choice but to question her about her supernatural story. The defense launched a vigorous assault on her, but their tactics ultimately backfired when she responded with grace and unwavering adherence to her account. Mary Jane claimed that as a devout Christian who was not superstitious, she knew what she saw was not a dream or a fantasy. And because the defense had brought up the ghostly encounters, the judge saw no way to stop the prosecution from discussing it, turning it into a pivotal piece of the trial. Mary Jane, along with Trout's first wife, ensured he appeared as incriminating as possible before he could even take the stand, painting a damning picture of his character to the jury. When Trout did take the stand, he spoke at great length, denying every allegation about his character and professing his innocence. However, newspapers at the time reported that he did more harm than good for his case, as his erratic behavior and claims of being persecuted left an unfavorable impression on spectators. After 8 days, the trial ended, and within less than an hour, the jury returned a guilty verdict for Trout, who had confidently asserted to reporters that he would never be convicted due to there being no evidence against him. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, but his fate took a dramatic turn when an enraged mob gathered believing justice had not been served. Seeking to lynch him, a deputy was able to intervene and calm the situation, resulting in 4 members of the mob facing charges relating to vigilante justice. Trout was subsequently incarcerated at the West Virginia State Prison in Moundsville, where he died 3 years later on March 13, 1900, when an epidemic swept through the prison. Even though the sensationalism surrounding Zona's death eventually waned in the courts, newspaper articles and folklore kept the story alive, often blending fact and fiction. Some of these stories even painted Trout as a serial killer who had murdered all 3 of his wives. As a result, the story of the Greenbrier Ghost remains riddled with inconsistencies, clouding the truth of what really happened. Some investigators discovered an intriguing coincidence. On the very day that Zona died, the Greenbrier Independent featured an article from Australia detailing a murder witness who claimed the ghost of the victim appeared to him and revealed the burial site. As a result, many skeptics trying to debunk Mary Jane's story have suggested she fabricated the ghostly narrative after reading this article in a local paper. However, it's unclear if Mary Jane could even read, as she was described as poorly educated, despite being recorded as literate on the 1880 census. It's important to note that at the time, literacy often meant basic skills such as reading Bible passages, not necessarily being able to properly read or write. Furthermore, Mary Jane lived quite a considerable distance from Lewisburg, making it unlikely she would have seen the article in that day's newspaper. Though it's of course possible someone else either told her about it or brought the paper back to her small town. Because of the embellishments to the story, and given he was ultimately convicted on the evidence of a ghost, the question of Trout Shue's potential innocence can't be ignored. Obviously, in a modern courtroom, the case against him would have fallen apart, whether he truly murdered Zona or not. But at the time, convincing a jury of guilt didn't require the same burden of proof. Trout has been painted as an outsider and an abuser in the aftermath, but by all accounts it appears he was well regarded in the local community until Zona's death. In the courtroom, Trout faced the wrath of two women seeking vengeance on him and intent to tarnish his reputation, which was central to a person's credibility back then. Most records of the trial have been lost to time, but newspaper coverage seems to indicate the jury were truly convinced Zona had returned from the dead and pointed the finger of guilt squarely at her husband. With all that said, while Trout likely should have been legally acquitted of the crime, it doesn't mean he was actually innocent, nor does it mean Mary Jane didn't communicate with her dead daughter, or at least believe that she did. Mary Jane remained steadfast in her account of Zona's ghostly appearances and never again reported any sort of supernatural encounter. Mary Jane claimed that Zona's ghost had given her details about the Shue household and neighborhood that only she would know, but it's entirely possible she obtained this knowledge from other locals. One thing that is curious, however, is the ghost's retelling of the specific details of her broken neck. Could an uneducated woman really not only guess the manner of death, but the specifics of how the neck was broken? But then, given how many details of this story have been embellished, do we truly know that Mary Jane knew these details? Or was this added to the story later on to make it more compelling? Whatever the truth, Zona Hester Shue met a tragic end and was likely strangled and suffered a broken neck. The truth about Trout Shue's guilt or innocence has realistically been lost to time and folklore, given there does appear to be some evidence that Zona may have been pregnant and may have suffered a miscarriage. How does this information align with the fact that her neck showed signs of strangulation and being broken? Is it possible that Trout got into an argument with her upon learning she was miscarrying, causing him to lash out at her and blame her for the loss of their child? Could this have led to him attacking and ultimately killing her? And then there's the matter of the Greenbrier Ghost. Did Mary Jane truly witness something supernatural? Was her story fabricated after reading an article in a local newspaper? Did she really know about the specific broken vertebrae in Zona's neck? Or was this detail added later? Was a broken neck an easy speculation based on Trout's strange actions around Zona's neck and head? Or was she truly given the information by the ghost of her daughter? Ultimately, Mary Jane did know details about Zona's manner of death that were missed by the initial autopsy, and was convinced enough of their truth to rally locals and get her daughter's body exhumed. Would she really have done that on a mere guess? Perhaps the spirit of Zona really did visit her mother, and really did help bring her killer to justice. Or maybe this is all a wildly embellished tale with the truth of it all being lost to time. I guess we'll never truly know. A historical marker on Route 60 now commemorates the Greenbrier Ghost, reminding travelers of the spirit who played a crucial role in bringing her killer to justice. And with that, our exploration of the Greenbrier Ghost case comes to a close. As always, thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please check out some of my other true crime videos and consider subscribing to my channel. You have been watching The Mystery Abyss. In the quiet Bavarian village of Hinterkaifeck, Germany, a horrifying and still unsolved murder case unfolded in 1922, sending shockwaves through the entire nation. The disturbing and unsolved mystery of the Hinterkaifeck murders. The Gruber family, consisting of 6 members, lived on a remote and secluded farmstead, nestled amid vast fields and surrounded by dense forests. The brutal murders of Andreas Gruber, his wife Kazilia, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabrielle, and her 2 children, Kazilia and Joseph, shook the small community to its core and left investigators grappling with an enigmatic puzzle that remains unsolved to this day. Haunting occurrences leading up to the killings, the brutality of the murders, and the lack of a clear motive have left experts and amateur sleuths alike captivated by the horrific mystery of Hinterkaifeck. From whispers of potential incestuous relationships, to suspicions surrounding neighbors, and even chilling connections to a notorious American serial killer, the unsolved mystery behind the murders continues to echo through the corridors of history, leaving us to wonder who lurked in the dark and what malevolent force brought about the tragic demise of an entire family on that fateful night. Strange occurrences leading to tragedy. Life on the Hinterkaifeck farm had long been characterized by its peaceful and idyllic setting. However, the serenity of the rural life was soon disturbed by a series of eerie and unexplained events that unfolded in the months leading up to the tragedy. Approximately 6 months before the fatal attack, the family's maid, who had been an integral part of the household, abruptly quit her position. Her departure was accompanied by a chilling revelation. She claimed to have heard unsettling and inexplicable sounds emanating from the attic. Frightened and deeply disturbed, she firmly believed that the very foundation of the house was haunted by malevolent forces beyond comprehension. Andreas Gruber, the head of the family, was perturbed by the maid's allegations and sought to assuage her fears. In March 1922, his unease escalated when he stumbled upon a curious newspaper from Munich lying on the property. Strangely, he had no recollection of purchasing the paper, and the perplexity grew when he discovered that nobody in the vicinity subscribed to this particular publication. The incident left a lingering sense of vulnerability, as though unseen eyes were watching the family's every move. The tension mounted further when, just days before the fatal night, Andreas confided in his neighbors about an unsettling discovery. He had noticed fresh tracks in the newly fallen snow leading from the dense forest towards the farm's machine room. His keen instincts recognized that someone had ventured close to their home, and it was evident that the intruder had tampered with the machine room's door lock, leaving it broken and vulnerable. This revelation fueled a sense of paranoia and fear that an unknown malevolent presence was circling their peaceful sanctuary. Adding to the growing unease, the family began hearing mysterious and chilling footsteps coming from the attic during the dark hours of the night. Alarmed, Andreas initiated thorough searches of the building, but each time the attic appeared empty and devoid of any intruders. The inexplicable sounds, however, persisted, haunting the family and raising questions about the true source of these mysterious echoes. Despite the escalating sense of foreboding, the Gruber family chose to keep these unsettling occurrences to themselves. They dismissed offers of help from concerned neighbors and decided not to report these strange happenings to the authorities. Whether their decision was born out of stoicism, fear of ridicule, or the belief that they could handle the situation on their own remains an enduring mystery. In the tight-knit community of Hinterkaifeck, rumors of the family's predicament began to circulate. Whispers of the farm's cursed nature and dark omens started to spread like wildfire, intensifying the atmosphere of dread and apprehension that shrouded the once tranquil homestead. These strange occurrences would soon culminate in one of the most shocking and gruesome tragedies in German history, forever imprinting the name Hinterkaifeck in the annals of unsolved mysteries. As the investigation unfolded, the bizarre events leading up to the murders would play a pivotal role in the search for the elusive and enigmatic killer or killers responsible for the heinous crime. The tragedy unfolds. As March 31st, 1922 dawned, the Hinterkaifeck farm welcomed a new face into its fold, Maria Baumgartner, the freshly appointed maid. Unbeknownst to her, this seemingly uneventful day would mark the beginning of a horrifying chain of events that would forever shatter the tranquility of the Gruber family's abode. The evening took a sinister turn as the family was inexplicably lured one by one to the barn, located on the outskirts of the farmstead. With methodical precision, the perpetrator wielded a deadly mattock, a menacing pickaxe-like tool used for digging and chopping, as their weapon of choice. In the confined darkness of the barn, the members of the Gruber family, along with the elderly Cecilia Gruber, met their brutal end, falling victim to devastating blows to their heads. The assailant did not stop at the barn. They methodically proceeded to the heart of the home, the living quarters. In the midst of this nightmare, they encountered the innocent 2-year-old Joseph, soundly sleeping in his bassinet. Without mercy, the murderer struck the defenseless child, leaving behind an indescribable scene of horror. Maria Baumgartner, the maid, also fell prey to the merciless killer. Her sanctuary, the bedchamber, became the site of her untimely demise, ending her life in the hopeful beginning of her new employment in a cruel twist of fate. The farm became a haunting tableau of death, but 4 agonizing days would pass before the shocking discovery was made. On April 1st, the customary visit by coffee sellers Hans Sharofsky and Edward Sharofsky was met with eerie silence. Their knocks on the door and window remained unanswered, as if the farm had become swallowed by an abyss of desolation. Oblivious to the tragedy that awaited them, the visitors found the gate to the machine house open and chose to depart, unknowingly leaving behind the unimaginable horrors that lurked within the farmhouse. In the aftermath of the murders, a disturbing absence became apparent. Cecilia Gabriel, the 7-year-old daughter of Victoria, had been absent from school without excuse. Additionally, the entire family was conspicuously missing from the Sunday worship they so dutifully attended. These conspicuous absences, coupled with the pileup of unclaimed mail at the local post office, ignited concern among the neighbors, sensing that something was dreadfully wrong. As fate would have it, on April 4th, 1922, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a farmer living nearby, led a search party to the farmstead. Little did they know that the grim truth awaited them. Entering the barn, the shocking sight of 4 battered bodies greeted them, hidden beneath a somber veil of hay. Their worst fears materialized as they pressed forward to the heart of the home. Inside, they discovered the lifeless body of the young Joseph, and in another room, the life extinguished from Maria Baumgartner's eyes. The repercussions of this ghastly act reverberated far beyond the confines of the Hinterkaifeck farm. The chilling discovery marked the beginning of one of Germany's most infamous unsolved crimes, the Hinterkaifeck murders. As the search for answers ensued, the minds of investigators and the public alike grappled with the mysterious circumstances surrounding the tragedy, leaving a profound legacy of unanswered questions and lingering horror that persists to this day. Investigation challenges. The investigation into the Hinterkaifeck murders, led by Inspector Georg Reingruber and his department, was fraught with challenges from the outset. The horrific crime scene was plagued by a disturbing level of contamination, as numerous individuals had unknowingly tampered with the evidence. Curiosity or concern had compelled some to interact with the scene, moving bodies and items, and remarkably even cooking and partaking in meals within the very kitchen that bore witness to the unspeakable tragedy. Such actions unwittingly disturbed crucial clues, making the task of unraveling the truth all the more difficult for the investigators. Despite these initial setbacks, the unwavering determination of the investigative team pressed on. The day after the discovery of the bodies, the court physician Dr. Johann Baptist Aumüller took on the grim duty of performing autopsies within the confines of the barn, a harrowing task. It revealed that a mattock, a seemingly unassuming farm tool, was the likely instrument of death wielded by the ruthless perpetrator. Yet shockingly, the autopsy held an even more chilling revelation. The youngest victim, 2-year-old Kazelia, had endured a heart-wrenching struggle for survival. Her little body bore the heartbreaking evidence that she had been alive for several agonizing hours after the initial assault. In a desperate bid for life, she had resorted to tearing her own hair out, a haunting testament to the horror she had endured in her final moments. The investigation faced additional complexities as the motive remained shrouded in mystery. Initial suspicions pointed towards robbery, but this theory was quickly dismissed when a considerable sum of money was found untouched within the house. The evidence instead pointed to a more disturbing conclusion. The murderer or murderers appeared to have lived within the farm for several days after the killings. The telltale signs included evidence of cattle being fed, the entire supply of bread from the kitchen being consumed, and fresh cuts of meat taken from the pantry. This enigmatic aspect of the case puzzled investigators and the community alike, leaving them grappling with an elusive motive and an unidentifiable killer. Even more disturbingly, the haunting footsteps in the attic and the strange sounds that plagued the family in the months leading up to the tragedy now took on a chilling significance, suggesting that the perpetrator had perhaps been living within the very walls of the farm all along. As the investigation continued, a list of suspects began to take shape. Various individuals were considered, ranging from local craftsmen and vagrants to neighboring villagers. However, despite repeated arrests, no conclusive evidence pointed to the perpetrator, and the investigation eventually hit a wall. The files, brimming with testimonies, were eventually closed in 1955, rendering the case officially unsolved. In 1986, the final interrogations took place, marking the end of an era in the pursuit of justice for the Hinterkaifeck victims. Detective Chief Superintendent Konrad Muller's retirement marked the conclusion of a relentless quest for answers. Despite their best efforts, the investigators had been unable to unmask the killer or killers behind one of Germany's most baffling and chilling murder cases, leaving behind a legacy of frustration, sorrow, and an enduring desire for closure. The Hinterkaifeck murders have since persisted as an enigma that continues to captivate the imagination of true crime enthusiasts, and remains a haunting reminder of the boundless depths of human cruelty and the elusiveness of justice. Theories and speculations. In the wake of the Hinterkaifeck murders, a plethora of theories and speculations emerged, each attempting to shed light on the elusive truth behind the heinous crime, a ghost from the past. Among the most intriguing and haunting theories was the possibility that Victoria Gabriel's husband, Karl Gabriel, may have somehow survived the First World War and returned to the farm to perpetrate the brutal killings. The story of Karl's reported death during the war emerged as a significant piece of the puzzle. According to historical records, he had been listed as killed in action during a shell attack in Arras, France. However, what made this theory even more enigmatic was the fact that his body had never been recovered, leaving a shadow of doubt regarding his true fate. As news of the Hinterkaifeck murders spread, Rumors began to circulate about Carl's potential survival. Some claimed to have seen him alive and well, while others speculated that he might have deserted and escaped the horrors of war. The uncertainty surrounding Carl's death gave rise to the haunting question: what if he had returned to Hinterkaifeck, seeking answers and revenge for the troubled life he left behind? If Carl indeed returned, the sinister events that unfolded on that fateful night could have been driven by a deeply disturbed psyche, fueled by unresolved grievances or a thirst for retribution. Perhaps he believed that his family had betrayed him during his absence, leading him to exact a horrific and brutal vengeance. The possibility of him nursing a grudge against his father-in-law Andreas over his horrific actions and treatment of his own daughter, Carl's wife, added a sinister layer to this theory. If true, the Hinterkaifeck farmstead would have been the stage for a deeply personal and darkly motivated tragedy. However, like many theories in the Hinterkaifeck case, this speculation lacked conclusive evidence. The absence of any definitive proof of Carl's survival or return to the farm left investigators and amateur sleuths grappling with shadows and whispers from the past. It remained a tantalizing possibility, but one that eluded concrete confirmation. A dark family secret. Equally disturbing in their own right were the rumors surrounding potential incestuous relationships within the family, especially between Victoria and her father, Andreas Gruber. The speculations about a deeply disturbing and illicit affair raised haunting suspicions about their involvement in the tragic deaths that unfolded at Hinterkaifeck. Such whispers painted a picture of an insidious family secret hidden away in the remote and secluded farmstead. As investigators delved into this disturbing theory, they meticulously conducted medical examinations and carefully analyzed the forensic evidence. Their objective was to unravel the truth behind the heinous crimes and to ascertain whether a murder-suicide scenario could be plausible. However, the evidence gathered starkly contradicted the notion of self-inflicted injuries. The brutal nature of the killings and the lack of any signs of self-harm effectively ruled out the possibility of a murder-suicide scenario. The medical examinations of the victims' bodies yielded crucial information, revealing that each murder victim had suffered grievous blows to the head. The injuries were consistent with the use of a mattock, a pickaxe-like tool that was identified as the likely murder weapon. Moreover, the presence of defensive wounds on the bodies further pointed to a fierce struggle against an external assailant or assailants. These findings served to disentangle the truth from the darkness of speculations. The lack of any self-inflicted wounds laid bare the sinister reality that an external, malevolent force had indeed been at work in the Hinterkaifeck farmstead on that fateful night. The implications were chilling. This was no act of desperation or family tragedy, but a cold and calculated massacre perpetrated by an unknown assailant. Suspicious neighbors. In the years that followed the Hinterkaifeck murders, the investigation took a chilling turn with the emergence of a compelling account from former maid Crescens Rieger. Her testimony implicated the Bickler brothers, Anton and Karl, along with Georg Siegel, as potential suspects in the heinous crime. Rieger's insights shed new light on the dark mysteries surrounding the tragedy. Crescens Rieger had been an eyewitness to the events that unfolded at Hinterkaifeck until around September 1921, and her intimate knowledge of the farm and its inhabitants added weight to her testimony. According to her account, she believed that the Bickler brothers, Anton and Karl, might have been involved in the murders. This belief was rooted in conversations she had with Anton Bickler, during which he allegedly made chilling remarks, suggesting that the family should be dead. These unsettling words raised suspicions about Anton's intentions and potential motives. Adding to the eerie atmosphere of the account was Rieger's own experience with a mysterious stranger whom she encountered through her window at night. Rieger was convinced that the stranger was none other than Karl Bickler. This encounter fueled her growing suspicion that the Bickler brothers might have played a sinister role in the tragedy at Hinterkaifeck. However, Rieger's suspicions did not end with the Bickler brothers. Georg Siegel, who had prior connections to the farm, also came under scrutiny. Rieger reported that Siegel had broken into the Hinterkaifeck property before the murders and stolen various items. This association with criminal behavior raised questions about Siegel's possible involvement in the violent events that transpired at the farm. The combination of Rieger's insights and the connections she drew between the Bickler brothers and Georg Siegel added intriguing new dimensions to the ever-evolving list of potential suspects. As investigators dug deeper into Rieger's accounts and the background of these individuals, the complex web of relationships and motives began to take shape. Nevertheless, despite the compelling nature of Rieger's testimony, the case remained shrouded in ambiguity, with no definitive evidence linking any specific individual to the brutal killings. Rieger's statement was one of many intriguing leads that investigators explored over the years, but the elusive truth continued to evade them. A man who knew too much. The investigation into the Hinterkaifeck murders took a dark turn as suspicion fell on Lorenz Schlittenbauer, whose connections to the family and peculiar behavior on the day of the discovery raised eyebrows and kept him entangled in the web of suspicion for years to come. Rumors emerged that shortly after the death of his first wife in 1918, Schlittenbauer had been involved in a relationship with Victoria Gabriel. These rumors, coupled with his proximity to the victims and his familiarity with the farm, fueled speculation about his potential involvement in the tragic deaths. As investigators delved into Schlittenbauer's past and his connections to the family, they found themselves grappling with a compelling yet elusive puzzle. On the day the bodies were discovered, Schlittenbauer's actions raised red flags. Upon arriving at the farm with his friends to investigate, they found the doors to the barn locked. To gain entry, they had to break a gate, which seemed odd considering the circumstances. Strangely, after discovering the 4 bodies in the barn, Schlittenbauer alone reportedly unlocked the front door with a key and entered the house. This behavior was deemed suspicious, as it raised questions about how Schlittenbauer acquired the key and why he ventured into the house alone, given the uncertainty of whether the murderer might still be present. Moreover, during the investigation, Schlittenbauer made statements that seemed to indicate intimate knowledge of details only the killer would know. Witnesses and investigators alike found themselves unsettled by his apparent awareness of certain conditions at the scene. According to accounts in the case files, local teacher Hans Iblager encountered Schlittenbauer visiting the remains of the demolished Hinterkaifeck in 1925. When asked why he was there, Schlittenbauer reportedly mentioned the murderer's unsuccessful attempt to bury the family's remains in the barn, citing the frozen ground as the obstacle. This detail struck investigators as highly suspicious, as Schlittenbauer seemed to possess intimate knowledge of the conditions surrounding the crime scene. The unsettling revelations surrounding Schlittenbauer prompted repeated interrogations and kept him firmly in the sights of investigators for many years. Locals and law enforcement were haunted by the thought that someone close to the family, like Schlittenbauer, might have been responsible for the brutal killings. Yet despite their persistent efforts, no conclusive evidence ever linked Schlittenbauer directly to the crime. A deathbed confession. The Gump brothers, Adolf and Anton, added another layer of intrigue to the Hinterkaifeck case, as their connections to the Freikorps Oberland raised suspicions about their potential involvement in the gruesome murders. The Freikorps Oberland was a paramilitary organization in post-World War I Germany, known for its right-wing nationalist ideology, and their association with such a group caught the attention of investigators. The breakthrough in the Gump brothers' involvement came from their own sister, Crescentia Meyer, who reportedly made a shocking revelation on her deathbed. According to her account, Crescentia accused Adolf and Anton of being responsible for the heinous crime that claimed the lives of the Gruber and Gabriel family members and their maid. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community and reignited the investigation into the cold case. In light of the serious accusation made by their own sibling, authorities took action and remanded Anton Gump to police custody for further questioning and investigation. The possibility that a family member might have been involved in such a heinous crime sent shockwaves through the community and renewed a sense of urgency to solve the baffling case. However, the suspicions surrounding the Gump brothers did not ultimately lead to a resolution. After a brief period of police custody, Anton was released due to insufficient evidence linking him directly to the crime. Unfortunately, Adolf had already passed away in 1944, leaving investigators unable to question him directly about the accusations leveled against him. The lost penknife. Therese T's account added another layer of complexity to the Hinterkaifeck case, introducing the possibility of Karl and Andreas S. as potential suspects in the heinous crime. Her recollection of a chilling encounter from her childhood provided a unique perspective into the lives of the suspected perpetrators. According to Therese T., when she was just 12 years old, her mother received an unexpected visit from the mother of Karl and Andreas S. During this visit, the woman shockingly revealed her belief that her own sons, Karl and Andreas, were responsible for the murders that had shaken the small community of Hinterkaifeck. The revelation left Therese's family and the whole neighborhood in disbelief and fear, as the idea that 2 young men from their own midst might be capable of such brutality was almost unimaginable. What made this revelation particularly eerie was the mysterious detail that the stranger, who Therese's mother believed to be Karl or Andreas S., mentioned losing his penknife during the course of the crime. This seemingly insignificant remark provided a faint lead for investigators to pursue, raising hopes of potentially linking the penknife to the crime scene. However, despite their efforts, this lead ultimately led to a dead end, leaving investigators grasping at shadows and secrets that seemed impossible to untangle. An American serial killer. The theory linking the Hinterkaifeck murders to Paul Muller, a suspected serial killer in the United States, added an even darker and more chilling dimension to an already perplexing case. Authors Bill James and Rachel McCarthy James delved into the unsettling possibility that Muller, a German immigrant, might have committed a series of heinous crimes in the U.S. that bore striking resemblances to the brutal events at Hinterkaifeck. In their research and analysis, the authors found disturbing connections between the crimes attributed to Mueller in America and the Hinterkaifeck Massacre. One of the most unsettling commonalities was the use of a blunt farm tool, resembling a pickaxe, as the murder weapon in both cases. This shared modus operandi suggested that the same ruthless and malevolent force might be at work in both sets of killings. The authors detailed that Mueller's suspected crimes in the U.S. were characterized by random nighttime home invasions in or near small railroad towns. Entire families were bludgeoned to death with the blunt end of an axe, and the murders seemed to have been perpetrated by a sadistic individual. Such a pattern of violence struck chillingly close to the brutality witnessed at Hinterkaifeck. Moreover, the Jameses' hypothesis speculated that Mueller might have fled the U.S. for his homeland, Germany, in the early 20th century, possibly around 1912. This timing would coincide with the Hinterkaifeck murders in 1922, suggesting the chilling possibility that the notorious serial killer could have continued his reign of terror on foreign soil. However, despite the striking similarities and eerie coincidences, investigators faced significant challenges in linking Mueller conclusively to the Hinterkaifeck massacre. The case was complicated by the passage of time, the lack of modern investigative techniques, and the scarcity of concrete evidence that could definitively connect Mueller to the crime scene. While the theory remained haunting and thought-provoking, it ultimately fell into the realm of speculation due to the absence of concrete evidence and the lack of definitive records linking Mueller to Germany during the time of the murders. The elusive nature of the Hinterkaifeck case continued to keep the true identity of the perpetrator or perpetrators hidden in the shadows of history. Despite the myriad theories and speculations, the truth behind the Hinterkaifeck murders continues to elude investigators and historians alike. The relentless pursuit of justice has led to numerous dead ends, leaving the tragic events forever etched in history as one of Germany's most perplexing and chilling unsolved mysteries. The legacy of Hinterkaifeck remains a haunting reminder of the dark complexities of human nature and the enduring quest for closure in the face of unfathomable evil. The legacy and ongoing mystery. The chilling events at Hinterkaifeck have transcended the confines of time, leaving an indelible mark on history and captivating the imaginations of generations to come. The enigmatic case has proven irresistible to authors, filmmakers, and amateur sleuths who have sought to unravel its secrets and bring closure to this haunting tale. Over the years, a myriad of literary works, newspaper articles, documentaries, plays, and investigations have emerged in pursuit of the truth, each contributing to the perpetuation of the mystery surrounding the tragic events of that fateful night. In 2007, a team of 15 students from the Polizeifachhochschule in Fürstenfeldbruck applied modern criminal investigation techniques to the Hinterkaifeck case. Their comprehensive analysis confirmed the thoroughness of the initial investigation but criticized the lack of professional forensics. Although the murderer or murderers could no longer be identified with certainty, the students unanimously agreed on a main suspect. Out of respect for the suspect's descendants, the individual's name was withheld, leaving the enigma unresolved. Despite the abundance of theories, investigations, and speculations over the years, the truth behind the Hinterkaifeck murders continues to elude the grasp of those seeking answers. The lingering ambiguity surrounding the case has fostered a sense of fascination and curiosity among both seasoned investigators and amateur enthusiasts alike. As the years go by, the legacy of Hinterkaifeck endures as a poignant reminder of the mysteries that remain unsolved and the human yearning for understanding and closure in the face of the inexplicable. The farmstead stands as a haunting monument to the past, a chilling reminder that some secrets may forever remain hidden, forever entwined with the fabric of history. Conclusion. Over the years, countless theories have been proposed, suspects named, and investigations conducted, each offering a glimpse into the complexities of the human psyche and the depths of darkness that can reside within. The tale of Hinterkaifeck has become a canvas for armchair detectives, authors, and filmmakers to weave their narratives, attempting to unravel the web of secrets that continue to shroud the truth. Despite the passage of time, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain a haunting reminder of the elusive nature of justice. The farmstead, once a place of serenity and toil, now stands as a somber reminder of the lives lost and the families forever scarred by the brutality of that fateful night. The unanswered questions and the absence of closure have etched this grim chapter into the annals of true crime history, a poignant reminder of the enduring scars left by unsolved mysteries. As the years have turned into decades, the enigma of Hinterkaifeck continues to fascinate and perplex, drawing people from around the world into its dark embrace. The farmstead's legacy persists through generations, sparking curiosity and speculation in the hearts of those who dare to confront the sinister unknown. Perhaps one day, with advancements in forensic science and new breakthroughs in investigative techniques, the secrets of Hinterkaifeck will be brought to light. Until then, it stands as a chilling testament to the complexities of the human soul and the impenetrable depths of the human mind. In the realm of true crime, some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, and the Hinterkaifeck murders serve as a haunting reminder of the darkness that can dwell within even the most tranquil corners of the world. As we grapple with the specter of this unresolved case, we are reminded that some stories are meant to defy explanation, forever etched into the fabric of history as enduring riddles. Until the day the truth finally emerges from the shadows, Hinterkaifeck will continue to beckon, tantalizing the curious and leaving us with an unsettling question mark, forever haunting the pages of history. You have been watching The Mystery Abyss. Imagine a scenario where a colossal shark unexpectedly regurgitates a human arm. Most would assume a straightforward explanation. The shark had attacked a person, bitten off their arm, and swallowed it whole. However, reality often defies expectations. In 1935, a captive tiger shark in Australia astounded onlookers by spewing forth a human arm. Initially, it seemed like a straightforward case of a shark attack. Yet as investigators delved deeper, they discovered a far more intricate and perplexing story. Contrary to the initial assumption, the shark's teeth hadn't severed the arm. A peculiar piece of tiger shark throat debris hinted at something more sinister, a mystery that would grip the nation. The arm was identified as belonging to Jimmy Smith, a former boxer whose life took a dark turn after he hung up his gloves, immersing himself in Australia's criminal underworld. This strange incident marked the beginning of a tale that defied logic and unraveled in unexpected ways. The shark arm mystery became a puzzle that intrigued the curious minds of investigators, challenging their understanding of the human capacity for deception and violence. Little did they know, the shocking discovery was merely the tip of the iceberg, leading them into a labyrinthine world of crime, betrayal, and mystery. The shark arm murders. Off the serene shores of Coogee Beach in the idyllic spring of 1935, Bert Hobson, a seasoned fisherman, cast his line 3 kilometers off the coast of Sydney, Australia, hoping for a fruitful catch. Coogee Beach, renowned for its tranquil waters protected by the nearby Wedding Cake Island, was the backdrop for this unsuspecting drama. In a twist of fate, Hobson's routine fishing day took an extraordinary turn. As Hobson reeled in his line, he found himself entangled in nature's brutal ballet. A smaller shark he had hooked was snatched up by the jaws of a larger tiger shark, a majestic creature stretching 4 meters in length. This predatory spectacle unfolded before Hobson's eyes, underscoring the ruthless hierarchy of the sea. Deciding to seize the moment, Hobson opted not to release the formidable tiger shark. Instead, he embarked on an unusual journey, transporting the living giant to the Coogee Aquarium and Swimming Baths, a local establishment managed by his brother Charles. The arrival of this awe-inspiring specimen ignited a spark in the eyes of the aquarium's curator, setting the stage for a remarkable chapter in the coastal town's history. Chapter 1. We're going to need a bigger tank. Sharks had suddenly become the talk of the town, and not for reasons that put anyone at ease. The genesis of modern shark hysteria can be traced back to the 1970s, with the iconic film Jaws casting a long shadow. However, the fear of these marine predators had gripped the public's imagination long before Spielberg's blockbuster hit the screens. Back in 1916, a wave of terror swept the New Jersey shore, marked by 4 shark attacks in just a fortnight. This chilling series of events not only horrified coastal communities, but also served as the inspiration for Peter Benchley's novel Jaws, which in turn led to the iconic movie we all know today. Fast forward 2 decades, and Australia found itself ensnared in a rising tide of shark paranoia. In the months leading up to the capture of the tiger shark off Coogee Beach, 3 tragic incidents occurred in nearby waters, leaving the public on edge. The media was ablaze with shark-related news, a phenomenon that Bert Hobson, the astute proprietor of the local aquarium, recognized as an opportunity. Capitalizing on the prevailing fascination with these mysterious creatures, Hobson's instincts proved correct. The acquisition of the tiger shark became a spectacle, drawing crowds to the aquarium for a first-hand encounter with the fearsome predator. In the week following the acquisition of the tiger shark, droves of curious visitors inundated the aquarium, eager for a glimpse of the awe-inspiring creature. Yet the bustling atmosphere took a chilling turn on Anzac Day, a revered national holiday in Australia akin to Veterans Day in the United States. On this bustling day for Hobson's business, an inexplicable event unfolded, casting a grim shadow over the aquarium. Around 4:30 in the afternoon, the tiger shark's behavior took a bizarre turn. Its demeanor shifted, and suddenly the creature began to vomit. Initially disgorging a rat and a bird, the spectacle took a horrifying twist. From the depths of the shark's stomach emerged something infinitely more shocking and perplexing. A human arm, a ghastly discovery that sent shockwaves through the crowd, leaving onlookers speechless. Chapter 2. The True Predator. The investigation kicked off with a sense of urgency, but it didn't take long for the case to veer sharply into the realm of the inexplicable. When the police arrived at the aquarium, their grim task was to retrieve the severed arm from the tiger shark's tank. It was a daunting assignment, but they approached it with professional composure. The arm, once recovered, underwent meticulous examination by the medical examiner. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the investigators. The shark's teeth, formidable as they were, could not have been the instrument responsible for severing the arm. Instead, it was evident that the limb had been expertly separated from a body, most likely by a sharp implement like a knife. The grim truth emerged. The victim had met a brutal end at the hands of a murderer, not a shark. Despite spending 8 to 18 days within the acidic confines of the shark's stomach, the arm still bore a distinguishable tattoo. A pair of boxers in a ring was etched into the skin, a poignant detail that would later become a crucial lead in the investigation. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the news of the arm's discovery caught the attention of Edwin Smith. As he read the unsettling account in the newspaper, a chilling realization dawned upon him. Alarmed, he contacted the police, convinced that the arm they had recovered might belong to his brother, Jimmy Smith. Chapter 3. The Chronicle of Jimmy Smith. In the vibrant tapestry of 1930s Sydney, Jimmy Smith, though born in England, found his home in the bustling suburb of Gladeville. A former lightweight boxer, Smith had transitioned into a new chapter of his life, managing a billiards hall in the heart of the city. Despite his changing career, he remained deeply rooted in a world that teetered on the edge of legality. While some described Smith as a man with no foes, the truth was far more complex. He had traversed the shady realms of Sydney's underbelly, often rubbing shoulders with individuals of questionable repute. His entanglement with the notorious Reginald Holmes, a key figure in Australian crime, marked a significant chapter in his life. Initially working as a builder for Holmes, Smith gradually delved into a realm rife with illegal activities. The duo's ventures frequently involved boats, a natural choice given Holmes's expertise as a boat builder. Together, they navigated the illicit waters embroiled in a world of drug trafficking. Smith and another associate, both in Holmes's employ, utilized a speedboat to retrieve cocaine dropped from passing ships. Their clandestine cargo was then ferried ashore, finding its way into the city's underbelly. But that wasn't the extent of Smith's criminal escapades. He also played a pivotal role in an insurance scam involving a sunken vessel, the Pathfinder. This nefarious scheme, designed to exploit insurance claims, showcased Smith's audacity and cunning. As fate would have it, another character, Patrick Brady, entered the scene. Despite a past conviction for forgery, Brady became an integral part of their trio, using his expertise to orchestrate a series of scams alongside Holmes and Smith. In the intricate dance of crime and deception, Jimmy Smith's life became a tale of ambition, risk, and the dark allure of the 1930s underworld. A story etched into the very fabric of Sydney's history. Chapter 4. Shadows of Betrayal. In the intricate tapestry of crime, the partnership between Smith and Holmes began to fray, its threads unraveling due to a suspected botched scam, as later speculated by investigators. The final sighting of Jimmy Smith occurred on a fateful evening, April 7th, when he was seen indulging in drinks with his literal partner in crime, Patrick Brady. Witnesses observed them engaged in a game of dominoes at a hotel just outside Sydney, their laughter and camaraderie masking the sinister undercurrents at play. As the night wore on, Smith and Brady abruptly departed the hotel, their destination shrouded in mystery. Little did anyone know that this would be the last time Smith would be seen alive. When news of Smith's disappearance surfaced and suspicions of foul play arose, the eyewitness accounts from that evening turned a spotlight on Brady. It was revealed that on the same night, Brady had rented a nearby cottage, a location that would become the epicenter of the unfolding tragedy. The unfortunate turn of events pointed a damning finger at Brady. A vigilant taxi driver recalled ferrying him to Reginald Holmes's residence shortly after the investigators believed the murder transpired, cementing Brady's connection to the crime scene. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, creating a compelling narrative that led authorities to scrutinize both Brady and Holmes. Amidst the mounting pressure, neither Brady nor Holmes proved cooperative. Their reluctance to divulge information only deepened the suspicions surrounding them. Eventually, Holmes managed to secure his release by feigning ignorance about Brady, who found himself ensnared in the clutches of justice, charged with the murder of Jimmy Smith. The saga continued, a dark tale of betrayal and secrets, leaving a trail of unanswered questions in its wake. Chapter 5: A Fateful Morning on Sydney Harbor. In the wake of intense police scrutiny surrounding Jimmy Smith's death, Reginald Holmes found himself grappling with a turbulent sea of emotions. A few days after the inquiries began, Holmes embarked on an early morning voyage, setting sail on one of his boats across the tranquil waters of Sydney Harbor. Accompanying him were a bottle of brandy and a small handgun. As the hours passed, the intoxicating embrace of the brandy seemed to envelop Holmes, and in a moment of despair, he decided to end his life. An eerie twist of fate unfolded as the bullet meant for his own demise struck him in the forehead, but failed to deliver the final blow. Instead, the force of the gunshot propelled him overboard, plunging him into the frigid waters. Miraculously, he regained consciousness, clambered back onto his boat, and initiated a reckless, high-speed journey toward the bustling expanse of Sydney Harbor. The erratic spectacle did not escape the notice of vigilant police officers patrolling the waters. Holmes's wild trajectory raised alarms, leading to his eventual arrest on the busy Sydney Harbor. Authorities sought answers, yearning to comprehend the motives behind Holmes's attempt on his own life. Holmes provided a narrative that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. He recounted a harrowing encounter with Brady, who had allegedly brandished the severed arm of Jimmy Smith, using it as a menacing bargaining chip. Brady's threat was clear: give him money or he would implicate him in Smith's murder. Holmes vehemently asserted that he played no role in the murder. Instead, he claimed that Brady alone had committed the gruesome act, dismembered Smith's lifeless body, and consigned the dismembered parts to the unforgiving ocean, an ominous tradition known among criminals as a Sydney send-off. Holmes went on to explain that while he had no involvement in the murder, he was the one who had disposed of the severed arm in the waters. Police, eager to uncover the truth, asked Holmes to stand as a witness at an impending inquest regarding the murder. He consented to cooperate, casting a faint glimmer of hope on the dark horizon. Yet on the morning designated for the inquest, a grim discovery awaited. Reginald Holmes was found lifeless in his car, his existence extinguished by 3 gunshot wounds. The tragedy marked the enigmatic conclusion of a man who had been entangled in a web of crime, leaving behind unanswered questions and shadows of doubt. 2 prevailing theories about what happened to Reginald were floated by investigators, each weaving its own intricate tale of deception and darkness. The first, almost surreal theory proposed an extraordinary narrative. Reginald Holmes had purportedly orchestrated his own demise by hiring a hitman, a notion that baffled minds given his prior survival of a suicide attempt. The second theory, while unproven, resonated with a semblance of credibility. It whispered of Patrick Brady, ensconced within prison walls, leveraging his criminal connections to orchestrate Holmes's murder. This calculated move ensured Holmes' silence forever. The courtroom buzzed with speculation, the air thick with unanswered questions. With their key witness dead, no sign of the rest of Smith's body, and no actual hard evidence to try Brady for the murder. Despite being convinced he was guilty, the police were forced to acquit and release him. Nobody was ever charged with the murder. Amidst these convoluted narratives, yet another revelation emerged, casting a murky shadow over the entire affair. Rumors surfaced suggesting that Jimmy Smith might have been a fizzer or fizzgig, colloquial terms denoting a police informant. This revelation, like a spectral ghost, haunted the proceedings, adding another layer of complexity to an already baffling case. Strikingly, no one was ever charged with Smith's murder, leaving the truth buried in the sands of time. In a desperate bid for more evidence, the captive shark, once an unwitting player in this macabre drama, was dissected, yet it yielded no additional clues, leaving investigators at an impasse. As the years passed and the case grew colder, Brady, until his death in 1965, vehemently maintained his innocence, a steadfast stance amid the eerie echoes of a crime that continued to elude comprehension. The shark arm murders remain an unsolved mystery, a chilling enigma that transcends time. Theories abound, implicating gangsters and criminals in a web of violence and betrayal. Was Smith's fate sealed due to his role as a police informant? Did Brady act alone, or was he a pawn in a more sinister game orchestrated by larger criminals? The story of the Shark Arm murders continues to captivate the imagination of true crime enthusiasts and investigators alike. With each passing year, the mystery deepens, leaving us to ponder the secrets that lie beneath the surface of this haunting tale. A tale that will forever be etched into the dark corners of Sydney's grisly past. You have been watching The Mystery Abyss. In the quiet afternoon of January 2nd, 1935, the President Hotel in bustling downtown Kansas City welcomed an enigmatic guest. A solitary figure, he arrived at 1:20 p.m., devoid of luggage, carrying only a comb and a toothbrush. This mysterious traveler, who identified himself as Roland T. Owen, had a peculiar request: an interior room on a high floor. Room 1046, perched on the 10th floor, became his temporary abode. Owen's interactions were limited. He briefly complained about the exorbitant rates of a nearby hotel before venturing out sporadically, vanishing from sight. The hotel's staff, accustomed to diverse clientele, didn't pay much heed to his peculiar behavior. They assumed him to be just another transient guest, not uncommon in their line of work. In a place where anonymity was often preferred, the staff chose not to delve into the question of Roland T. Owen. However, the intrigue surrounding Owen escalated abruptly a couple of days later when his lifeless body was discovered in room 1046. The once quiet space had transformed into a nightmarish crime scene, a grim testament to a violent struggle. As the shaken staff recounted the harrowing details to the authorities, the peculiarities of Owen's behavior leading up to his demise became apparent, raising unsettling questions about the events that had transpired within those walls. The sinister murder in room 1046. Day 1. In the early afternoon of January 2nd, 1935, a mysterious figure entered the Hotel President, located in the vibrant Power and Light district of Kansas City, Missouri. His demeanor was sharp, his attire impeccable, and he exuded an air of quiet confidence. Giving his name as Roland T. Owen and claiming a Los Angeles residence, he requested an interior room located several floors above the bustling city streets. The hotel staff, struck by his appearance and the visible scar on his temple, speculated that he might be a boxer or professional wrestler. Despite his cryptic aura, he appeared to be in his early 20s. Accompanied by Randolph Probst, a bellhop, Owen ascended in the elevator to the 10th floor. During the ride, he casually mentioned his previous night's stay at the nearby Muehlbach Hotel, dismissing it due to the steep $5 nightly rate. Upon reaching room 1046, situated on the inside with a view of the hotel's courtyard as per his request, Owen unpacked minimally, retrieving only a hairbrush, comb, and toothpaste from his overcoat pocket. Probst observed these meager belongings before leaving the room. Subsequently, Owen locked the door himself, holding the key. Shortly after, Mary Soptic, a hotel maid returning from her day off, was assigned to clean room 1046. To her surprise, Owen was inside, despite a woman having occupied the room the previous night. Apologizing for the intrusion, Soptic was granted permission to proceed with her cleaning duties. Inside, she noticed Owen's preference for dim lighting, keeping the room almost entirely in darkness. During her cleaning, Owen displayed signs of anxiety, which Soptic later relayed to the police. He frequently kept the shades drawn and maintained a solitary lamp's dim glow. After a brief cleaning period, Owen donned his overcoat, meticulously brushed his hair, and left, informing Soptic of his expectation of friends arriving shortly. Following his request, Soptic left the room unlocked. Returning at 4 p.m. with fresh towels, Soptic found room 1046 in darkness. Inside, Owen lay on the bed, fully clothed. A note on his bedside table caught her attention, bearing a cryptic message. "Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." This mysterious encounter marked the beginning of a series of events that would ultimately shroud room 1046 in an impenetrable veil of mystery. Day 2. On the morning following Owen's check-in at the President Hotel, Mary Soptic, the diligent hotel maid, found herself entangled in a web of perplexing events within room 1046. It was around 10:30 a.m. when she returned, expecting the room to be vacant due to the door being locked from the outside. To her astonishment, she discovered Roland T. Owen inside, seated in the same dim light as the previous day. As the phone rang, he answered it, engaging in a conversation where he steadfastly insisted he wasn't hungry, despite the caller's persistence. While Soptic diligently continued her cleaning tasks, Owen's curiosity was piqued. He inquired about her job, delving into her responsibilities for the entire floor and questioning the hotel's residential status. He once again voiced his dissatisfaction with the exorbitant rates of the Mielbach Hotel. Soptic responded swiftly, completing her cleaning duties before leaving Owen alone in room 1046. It wasn't until after she exited that she realized the peculiarity of the situation. Since the door had been locked from the outside, someone must have intentionally confined Owen within his room. Later that day, Soptic returned with fresh towels, having taken the used ones from the room earlier that morning, only to encounter an unexpected twist. This time she heard two distinct voices conversing inside room 1046, knocking and announcing the towels. She was met with a commanding, unfamiliar voice instructing her to leave, claiming they had sufficient towels. Despite her certainty that she had removed all the towels during her earlier visit, Soptic chose not to press the matter. She respected the apparent need for privacy, sensing that the conversation within was delicate and personal. Leaving the room, she opted not to intrude further. Later that same day, the President Hotel welcomed two more guests, both of whom would become pivotal figures in the unfolding mystery surrounding Roland T. Owen's fate in room 1046. The first newcomer was Jean Owen, unrelated to Roland, who had ventured to Kansas City to spend the day with her boyfriend. Opting to stay the night rather than make the long drive back to her out-of-town residence, she checked into the President Hotel in room 1048, right next door to Roland. Throughout the night, Jean heard disturbing noises. In her later statement to the police, she claimed to have heard loud conversations filled with profanity and cursing that seemed to emanate from the same floor. She heard both male and female voices. Although concerned, she hesitated to contact the front desk, ultimately deciding against it. Additionally, a familiar face made her presence felt in the hotel, referred to as a commercial woman by hotel staff. She was known for her late-night visits to male guests' rooms. On this particular evening, she was on a quest to find a man allegedly residing in room 1026. Elevator operator Charles Blocker, starting his shift at midnight, was asked by her about room 1026. Later, he saw her again, discussing the absence of a client in room 1026, suggesting he might be in room 1046 instead. The woman remained on the floor, and Blocker encountered her multiple times, escorting her to different rooms, including some on the 9th floor. Around 4:15 a.m., he accompanied her to the lobby with a different man, and she left the hotel for the night. Subsequently, Blocker's elevator received a call from the man who had been with her stating he couldn't sleep and planned to go for a walk. There were other peculiar encounters outside the hotel as well. At 11 p.m., a city worker named Robert Lane was flagged down by a man dressed only in an undershirt, pants, and shoes. The man, who appeared distressed, asked for a ride to find a taxi. During the drive, Lane noticed a deep scratch on the man's arm. When Lane later saw the same scratch on Owen's body, he alerted the police, believing he had given a ride to the deceased man. The connection between these incidents and the Owen case remained uncertain, leaving a web of unanswered questions and mysterious events that further deepened the intrigue surrounding room 1046. Day 3. At 7 a.m. the following morning, the tranquil halls of the President Hotel were shattered by the beginning of a series of horrifying events. Della Ferguson, the newly assigned switchboard operator, embarked on her morning shift with routine tasks in mind. However, her plans were abruptly interrupted when she noticed a peculiar light, indicating that the phone in room 1046 was off the hook. Little did she know, this discovery would set off a chain of events that would baffle the city for decades to come. Randolph Probst, the hotel staff member who had first accompanied Owen to his room, was once again thrust into an eerie situation. He was promptly assigned to investigate the ominous situation in room 1046. Upon reaching the room, Probst was met with a locked door and a conspicuous "Do Not Disturb" sign dangling from the knob. After several loud knocks, a voice from within urged him to enter. Perplexed, he attempted to open the door, but it remained firmly locked. After a few futile attempts, Probst resorted to shouting instructions to the occupant, assuming that they were merely inebriated. Probst informed Ferguson about the situation and advised her to wait another hour. However, by 8:30 a.m., the phone remained off the hook, and the situation became increasingly alarming. Another bellboy, Harold Pike, was dispatched to room 1046. Armed with a key, he cautiously entered the room and found Roland T. Owen lying naked on the bed, appearing disoriented and intoxicated. Disturbingly, dark spots on the bedding hinted at something far more sinister than drunkenness. Pike noticed that the phone had been knocked to the floor and placed it back on the stand. Around 10:30 a.m., the telephone operator's urgent call pierced the hotel's silence once more. Room 1046's phone was off the hook yet again. Probst, now familiar with the room's eerie atmosphere, was sent once more. Armed with his master key, he unlocked the door and stumbled upon a horrifying sight. Owen was now huddled in a corner, his body bearing the marks of brutal violence. The room was a scene of carnage, with bedsheets and towels soaked in blood, and walls splattered with it. A grim tableau of violence that revealed a harrowing struggle had transpired. Props hurried downstairs for assistance and returned with the assistant manager. They could only partially open the door since Owen had fallen to the floor. When they managed to enter, Owen was seated on the edge of the bathtub. The authorities were called, and Dr. Harold Flanders from Kansas City General Hospital arrived to assess the situation. Owen had been mercilessly bound with cords around his neck, wrists, and ankles. His neck showed signs of strangulation attempts, and he had multiple stab wounds in his chest, one of which had punctured his lung. Blows to his head had resulted in a skull fracture. Despite the severity of his injuries, Owen claimed that nobody had harmed him, attributing his wounds to a fall and hitting his head on the bathtub. When asked if he had attempted suicide, he vehemently denied it. Shortly after, Owen lost consciousness and was rushed to the hospital. Tragically, he succumbed to his injuries and passed away shortly after midnight on January 5th. In a chilling twist, doctors discovered that Owen's wounds had been inflicted well before the first visit by the hotel staff that morning. His desperate attempts to call for help had only resulted in the phone receiver being lifted, a haunting echo of his futile struggle. The enigma of room 1046 persisted, casting a dark shadow over the President Hotel. The perplexing events surrounding Roland T. Owen left a city in shock, grappling with an unsolved mystery that would haunt the collective consciousness for years to come. The investigation begins. The Kansas City Police Department sprang into action immediately, their focus honing in on the perplexing case that had unfolded in room 1046. Intrigued by the coincidence of Jean Owen's identical last name and her proximity to the deceased man, the detectives promptly detained her for questioning. Jean Owen, perplexed by the events, recounted her observations from the previous night. Her boyfriend's testimony corroborated her account, leading to her release. She returned to her residence in Lee's Summit, still shaken by the bizarre events she had witnessed. An autopsy conducted on Roland T. Owen's body confirmed the cause of death, as the wounds inflicted upon him. Dr. Flanders, not only examining the body, but also meticulously assessing the bloodstains within the room, estimated that the fatal injuries had been sustained between 4 and 5 a.m. that day. These findings aligned with the observations made by Pike and Probst, shedding light on the timeline of the tragic events. As detectives delved into room 1046, they were struck not only by what they found, but also by what was conspicuously absent. Reflecting Probst's earlier observations, there were no clothes in the closets or drawers, raising questions about the victim's belongings. Notably, a solitary clue emerged in the form of a necktie tag, indicating its origin from a New Jersey company. The absence of standard hotel amenities such as soap, shampoo, and towels deepened the mystery surrounding the room. The absence of knives led to the rejection of the idea Owen had taken his own life. The nature of the stab wounds and the cords used for binding hinted at the involvement of others. Further perplexing the investigators were seemingly unrelated items discovered: a hairpin, safety pin, an unsmoked cigarette, and a full bottle of diluted sulfuric acid. Intriguingly, 4 fingerprints, petite enough to be deemed a woman's, were discovered on the room's phone. Despite exhaustive efforts, these prints could not be matched to Owen's or any known hotel personnel who had entered the room. Facing this labyrinthine puzzle, the police turned to the press, seeking public assistance. The city's evening newspapers prominently featured the case, underscoring the detectives' conviction that another person was intricately involved in the unfolding drama. Detective Johnson, addressing the reporters, affirmed that the case was unequivocally considered a homicide, intensifying the urgency to unravel the mystery shrouding room 1046. The Phantom. The mysterious identity of the man in room 1046 continued to baffle investigators, leading them to the realization that Roland T. Owen was likely a false name. Kansas City officers reached out to their counterparts in the Los Angeles Police Department to locate next of kin. Surprisingly, the LAPD could find no trace of anyone by that name residing in Los Angeles during that period. To deepen the investigation, the deceased man's fingerprints were sent to the Justice Department's Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI, in hopes of finding a match within their extensive collection. Amidst the growing intrigue, a woman called the hotel president, inquiring about the appearance of Roland T. Owen. She claimed he resided in Clinton, located 50 miles southeast of Kansas City. News of the man's demise under an assumed identity reached the public via Sunday newspapers, sparking a flurry of tips. The encounter involving the man outside the hotel was reported, and he was also seen in the company of 2 women at various liquor establishments on 12th Street. The story garnered national attention as wire services picked up the tale, prompting widespread coverage in newspapers and on the radio. Requests for photographs flooded Kansas City, generating more leads. Police dedicated substantial resources to communicate with law enforcement agencies across the country, following up on these leads via mail and telegram. Many potential leads were pursued, but most proved to be dead ends. Investigating Owen's claims about his stay at the Mulebach Hotel, officers found that no one named Roland T. Owen had checked in. Instead, they discovered a man resembling Owen who had registered as Eugene K. Scott, sharing the same Los Angeles address. However, this lead also went cold as the LAPD confirmed the absence of such an individual in their records. Confusion deepened when a man initially identified the body as his cousin, only for his sister to later confirm that the cousin had passed away 5 years earlier. A wrestling promoter named Tony Bernardi from Little Rock, Arkansas, claimed that the deceased, under the name Cecil Werner, had approached him about wrestling matches in December 1934. Before long, with no leads and more pressing homicides to investigate, the case grew cold, prompting detectives to arrange a modest burial. But events that unfolded around the funeral were about to make the case even more unusual. The mysterious funeral. On March 3rd, the mystery surrounding the unidentified man from room 1046 resurfaced in the newspapers. The funeral home responsible for the body's care announced plans for a pauper's field burial, scheduled for the next day. However, a twist occurred when the funeral home received an unexpected call from a man requesting a delay in the funeral proceedings, explaining that he intended to send money for a proper grave and service at Memorial Park Cemetery in Kansas City, so the deceased man could rest near his sister. Despite the funeral director's warning that he would inform the police, the caller remained undeterred. Curiosity piqued the funeral director's interest, leading him to inquire about the motive behind Owen's demise. The caller revealed a grim tale. Owen had been involved in an affair while engaged to another woman. The caller, along with the 2 women involved, had orchestrated the meeting at the President Hotel to exact revenge. The caller cryptically remarked, "Cheaters usually get what's coming to them," before abruptly ending the call. In response to the anonymous caller's request, the funeral service was postponed. Later, the funeral home received a carefully addressed delivery envelope containing $25, wrapped in newspaper enough to cover the funeral expenses. The sender's identity remained a mystery. Additionally, 2 envelopes, each containing $5, were sent to a local florist to arrange 13 American Beauty roses for the grave. Similar to the previous call, these arrangements were made from payphones. Accompanying the payment was a card with disguised handwriting, bearing the message, "Love forever, Louise." The funeral proceeded shortly afterward, attended only by police detectives, some of whom acted as pallbearers. To maintain surveillance, other detectives posed as gravediggers, watching over the grave for several days. However, no visitors appeared. A few days following the funeral, a woman contacted the Kansas City Journal-Post's newsroom. She disputed their earlier story, asserting that the man from room 1046 had received a formal funeral, contrary to the pauper's grave rumor. When asked to identify herself, she cryptically replied, "Never mind, I know what I'm talking about." Pressed further, she mysteriously stated, "He got into a jam," before abruptly ending the conversation, leaving journalists and investigators with more questions than answers. The mystery deepens. The quest to identify the deceased man from room 1046 took an intriguing turn when Ruby Ogletree, residing in Birmingham, Alabama, stumbled upon an article in the American Weekly, a Sunday newspaper supplement. The article showcased images of the unidentified man, striking a resemblance to Ruby's son, Artemis, whom the family had not seen since his departure for California via hitchhiking in 1934, alongside his friend Joe Simpson. Despite his absence, Artemis had maintained regular correspondence with his family. Driven by a mixture of hope and dread, Ruby reached out to the Kansas City Police Department with vital details about the anonymous corpse, including a description of a distinctive head scar resulting from a childhood accident involving spilled hot grease. In a subsequent issue of the newspaper's supplement, the man was officially identified as Artemis Ogletree, shedding light on his mysterious fate. However, this identification revealed a series of perplexing new mysteries. Ruby had received multiple letters purportedly from Artemis for months after what she now knew to be the day he died. The initial letter, postmarked in Chicago early in 1935, raised suspicions due to its typewritten format, a skill Artemis was not known to possess. Moreover, the letter's informal tone did not align with Artemis's usual correspondence. In May 1935, another letter arrived claiming Artemis's departure for Europe. This was followed by a special delivery letter stating that he had set sail that very day, both mailed from New York. In August of the same year, Ruby received a phone call from a man in Memphis, Tennessee. According to the caller, Artemis had saved his life in a fight and was now residing in Cairo, Egypt, having married a wealthy woman. The caller explained Artemis's inability to write, attributing it to the loss of one thumb during the altercation. During the conversation, Ruby noted the caller's erratic and irrational behavior, although he possessed intimate knowledge about Artemis. Ruby provided the police with the caller's name, which has never been disclosed publicly. The baffling aspect of this revelation was Artemis's supposed relocation to Egypt or any foreign country before his demise. No evidence supported his overseas travel under his own name. Steamship companies had no records of his voyages, and the U.S. Embassy's consular section in Cairo failed to find any traces of his presence there, deepening the mystery surrounding Artemis Ogletree's supposed journey. Further insights emerged as the Kansas City police delved deeper into the unusual case of Artemis Ogletree. Information gleaned from conversations with Ruby Ogletree led them to a third hotel in Kansas City, the St. Regis, where Artemis had also stayed. Curiously, he had shared a room with another man, but the identity of this companion, possibly the elusive Dawn, remained unverified. Theories and suspects. The mysterious nature of the case has given rise to various compelling theories, each attempting to unravel the puzzle of Room 1046. One prevailing theory stems from the anonymous telephone calls, hinting at a possible motive related to Ogletree's broken engagement. The notion that he might have been targeted in retaliation for this romantic entanglement has gained traction, supported by the cryptic messages left behind. Another intriguing perspective delves into the realm of organized crime, speculating that the elusive figure referred to as Dawn could potentially be a powerful mafia boss. This theory opens the door to a world of criminal connections and hidden motives, adding a layer of complexity to the investigation. There is also the chilling possibility that Dawn, whoever he may be, had a deeply personal vendetta against Ogletree. This theory suggests that the elusive Dawn might have acted alone, or intriguingly enlisted the help of the mysterious commercial woman observed by Blocker in the hotel that fateful night. The motive behind such a personal vendetta remains shrouded in speculation, leaving investigators and enthusiasts alike to grapple with the enigmatic circumstances of Room 1046. However, intriguingly, this strange case is predominantly discussed as if there is not, and has never been, any actual suspects. But this is far from the truth. Right from the start, a range of suspects have fallen onto the radar of police, each with elements of evidence linking them to the vicious crime. Detectives, spurred by the belief that the murder may have had a connection to sexual deviancy, meticulously scrutinized individuals nationwide. Fingerprinted, questioned, and compelled to provide handwriting samples, men from every corner of the country became unwitting players in this unusual tale. In 1940, a man named Thomas Wilbur Barlow, previously convicted of crimes against nature in Little Blue, Missouri, became a focal point of the investigation. Detectives, haunted by the specter of a sex maniac's alleged 1935 murder, probed Barlow. His signature, resembling that of Donald Kelso in the hotel registry, intensified their scrutiny. Under the relentless gaze of law enforcement, Barlow's testimony wavered, clouded by conflicting narratives. His confusion, attributed by the police to syphilis after a grueling 10-hour interrogation, left them with more questions than answers. Chief of Detectives T.J. Higgins, leading the charge, fixated on a lead in New York. Joseph Ogden, a convicted killer, emerged as a prime suspect. Higgins, after exhaustive deliberation, declared himself satisfied that Ogden had committed the crime. Meanwhile, the shadows of Ogden's own heinous acts loomed large. A gruesome murder, dismemberment, and an attempt to conceal the body in a trunk destined for Memphis. This sordid tale painted Ogden as a ruthless killer, sending shockwaves through the city. Ogden's dark past unfolded further as his admission records from Sing Sing prison surfaced. Unearthed by Kansas City Magazine, these documents revealed a chilling history. A journey through prisons and insane asylums, marked by escapes and violence. Ogden was also known to be homosexual, and among his aliases was Donald Kelso, a connection that led both Kansas City detectives and the New Yorker's editor to believe they had found their man. It was later confirmed by the FBI that Ogden's handwriting did not match that left in the hotel records by Donald Kelso. Is it possible his use of the same alias was nothing more than a coincidence? The one theory the police seem to have largely ignored over the years is the compelling case put forward by Ruby Ogletree. Ruby's instincts and the peculiar letters she received for 2 years after her son was killed until he was identified create an enticing argument for a different potential suspect. Ruby's correspondence with the Kansas City Police Department reveals her strong suspicions regarding Joe Simpson, the companion her son had left home with. Convinced of his guilt, Ruby went to great lengths, procuring Simpson's school records from Phillips High School, and persistently attempted to meet him in Birmingham, only to be stood up multiple times. Despite the police assurances given to her that Simpson had been thoroughly interviewed, Ruby's doubts remained. Ruby finally confronted Simpson on December 28, 1939, solidifying her conviction. In my conversation with the boy, Joe Simpson, I became reasonably certain that he is the person who spoke to me from Memphis, Tennessee, 7 months after my son was killed. she wrote in detail to the KCPD detectives. Ruby recounted her discussion with Simpson, recalling the conversation almost verbatim. The details were striking. Simpson expressed his belief that the case would never be solved, highlighting the absence of clues, leaving the detectives with nothing to work with. Ruby claims she looked Simpson in the eyes and told him she would recognize the voice that called her from Memphis, causing Simpson to turn red and become nervous and agitated. In a damning revelation, if Ruby's account is accurate, Simpson pledged to deliver a letter from Artemis, claiming it was badly typed. However, Simpson failed to keep his appointment, leaving Ruby hanging. The inconsistency was glaring. Artemis never possessed typing skills. All his pre-murder correspondence was handwritten. The typed letters received weeks after his demise likely originated from someone privy to the truth that Artemis Ogletree was no more. The KCPD continued to keep the case open, with different detectives periodically reviewing the evidence through the 1950s. Despite their ongoing efforts and expressions of determination to follow up on any leads, no substantial new evidence surfaced. As time passed, the investigation gradually grew cold, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and lingering uncertainties. In a peculiar turn of events in the early 2000s, John Horner, a local historian at the Kansas City Public Library, received an intriguing call from an individual outside the state. The caller revealed that they had been involved in cataloging the belongings of an elderly person who had recently passed away. Among the items discovered was a shoebox containing newspaper clippings related to the case and an object mentioned in the news stories. However, the caller chose to remain anonymous, leaving both their identity and the specific item undisclosed. Horner kept this cryptic revelation private until he shared it in 2 blog posts recounting the story in 2012. Adding another layer of mystery to the enduring enigma of Room 1046. Even today, the Room 1046 mystery continues to baffle. Kansas police reopen the case annually, hoping for new leads. Yet as of now, the riddle of Room 1046 stands unresolved, shrouded in an enduring veil of mystery. Conclusion. In the labyrinthine tale of Artemis Ogletree, the enigma that shrouded Room 1046, and the events leading to his tragic demise in the heart of Kansas City remains one of history's most perplexing mysteries. Despite the passage of time, the questions surrounding his fate persist, refusing to yield definitive answers. Artemis Ogletree's story is not merely a chronicle of a young man's life cut short, but a puzzle that encapsulates the essence of suspense and intrigue. From the cryptic encounters within the walls of the President Hotel to the shadowy figures that populated his final moments, every twist and turn paints a vivid picture of a life entangled in mysterious circumstances. As we delve into the depths of the unknown, it becomes apparent that the truth eludes us, buried beneath layers of speculation and ambiguity. The exhaustive investigations, the letters that arrived after Artemis's death, and the tantalizing clues all stand as testaments to the complexity of the case. The meticulous detective work, the persistent efforts of Artemis's mother, Ruby Ogletree, and the myriad theories woven over the years have attempted to unravel the enigma but have so far fallen short of a conclusive resolution. In this intricate web of theories and suspicions, one fact remains crystal clear. Artemis Ogletree's story continues to captivate the imaginations of those seeking to unveil the truth. It serves as a reminder of the intricacies of the human experience and the mysteries that can lurk behind even the most ordinary of circumstances. As we contemplate the unresolved aspects of Artemis's life and death, we are reminded of the enduring nature of mysteries, how they challenge our understanding, provoke our curiosity, and invite us to explore the depths of the unknown. The legacy of Room 1046 and the enigmatic figure of Artemis Ogletree endure, reminding us that in the vast tapestry of human history, some stories are destined to remain eternally mysterious, leaving us with questions that may never find their answers. You have been watching The Mystery Abyss.